Georgia because Georgia got drilled on Saturday. That's probably little comfort right now, just given the fact that they've got it wrong going into the SEC championship game there as well. But the smartest people in the world that put their money where their mouth is when they make their college football evaluations don't look solely at the last thing they saw. They look at the preponderance of evidence. And it is a little bit confusing why Bama played so well on Saturday but so poorly the previous week against a team that Georgia in the same stadium just a few weeks earlier had dominated. That's a little bit confusing, but all of that gets baked into the evaluation of what's happening here. In other words, right now, and on Saturday night, this was certainly true. No Georgia fan at all wanted to hear about Georgia beating Michigan in the semifinal game because it was already kind of fairly obvious that's who Georgia was going to play. Beating Michigan in a semifinal, coming back in a rematch against Alabama and having a chance to make that closer. Georgia fans didn't want to hear that then. There may be Georgia fans who still don't want to hear that now. But trust me when I tell you, people who have more financial interest vested in this conversation than you and I do absolutely believe that's a possibility. RX Dog says, and we're going to get ready to start here in about 3 minutes. RX Dog says, proud of Georgia, won't criticize players, but will critique millionaire coaches. First of all, RX Dog and I are on the same page on this, that I don't punch down. When I really kind of, I guess, spew my most intense vitriol, it's going to be in the direction of the folks who are making the millions of dollars. It just is. I'm a lot more comfortable criticizing a coach than I am a player, and I think that's just I just think that's the most appropriate way to do that. The average player, certainly makes a lot less for playing Georgia football than I do for doing this show, and has a smaller platform to reach folks. Not all players do, but the average player does. Smaller platform to reach the public than I do, sitting here in this chair for DawgNation. So if I'm going to turn my full, platform on something, it's going to be on a millionaire coach and not a player who, even in the NIL era, is not really cashing in a big way. I'm going to punch up, not punch down. So RX Dog and I are on very much the same page on that. He says, we are not a lead at the most important position. When it counted, we couldn't finish drives. Quarterback couldn't make plays to win. If we're asked to unify, then let's unify around facts, not now let's win a big title. Yeah, I don't think anyone, hopefully not me for certain, I don't think anyone's going to try to say that Georgia is the equal of other teams when it comes to the quarterback position. But there are also a lot of teams that have a lot better quarterbacks than maybe Georgia does, who are going to be watching Georgia on television in the college football playoff. And that's just, that's just kind of the thing. We talked about DawgNation unification, a while ago, and that whole unification idea was sort of built around, hey, uniting around the team, not any one player. And on Saturday, that unification becomes a little bit harder to conjure up because people are frustrated. And I think the thing that they are frustrated about the most is, at least if I'm reading correctly, it's Kirby Smart's inability to speak directly to this. And maybe that's fair, maybe that's not, but that seems to be the greatest frustration a lot of folks have is that when Smart talks on quarterbacks, he sounds like the worst kind of politician imaginable. And on almost any other subject, this is a straight shooter. This is a shoot from the hip guy. This is a, alpha dude who's ready to kind of take it head on. When it comes to quarterback, he sounds like he's, reading some sort of statement that was prepared for him by a boardroom full of lawyers. And I know that frustrates a lot of people. And maybe it's wrong to expect him to do more than that when it comes to such a touchy subject. I don't know fully. But it is true that when I listen to what fans are saying, and I do try to keep my ear to the ground on what folks are saying. When I listen to that, that's the thing that I feel like I hear the most clearly is that level of frustration of why isn't Smart just speaking to what a lot of folks feel like they see with their own eyes there? And in RX's case, I think he sums that up pretty well. However, to repeat what I said a moment ago, still don't think quarterback was the reason that Georgia lost on Saturday. It may have been the reason it didn't win once it got down, but it was the exposure of the Georgia defense that ultimately ended the game there on Saturday and prevented Georgia from having a chance to do that. Brandon Russell, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Jim McLaughlin says, need an elite quarterback to be able to compete in a shootout. If defense plays better, you can win with Bennett. Otherwise, you must have an elite quarterback. It's not complicated. I guess the only thing I really disagree with you on there is, the notion of a shootout. To me, it's got to be 30-something to 20-something. It can't be 45-42. That's just probably not what it is. First of all, those games are high-variance games anyway. I mean, that's a roller coaster right there. I mean, who knows what happens when you have that many scoring plays and that crazy kind of thing. When the college football playoff first began back in 2014, there was a phrase that the committee used a lot, the notion of game control. Just this thing they made up. They made it up out of thin air so they could get Ohio State into the playoff. But they started talking about the idea of game control. It was just a complete concoction they just pulled out of thin air. But there is still some level of truth to, Georgia on Saturday had no control of this game whatsoever. It could not get the requisite stops against Alabama. It could not use its strengths to dictate any part of how this game was played, and couldn't run the ball there because they were too far behind, and everything that kind of stemmed off that. Just had no control over that game. And so if you're lucky enough to get a rematch against Alabama, that's the one thing I think you need to see more of, is Georgia not holding them to 10 points because you can't do that, not holding them to 17 points because you probably can't do that either, but getting enough stops and enough moments so that you have a chance to play better offensively than you did on Saturday. And that, to me, is kind of what it comes down to. So we'll break it down every way it can be done. John Stinchcomb stops by and sees us. We're on all the platforms there as well: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're going to do this today, and then we're going to turn the page, because ultimately the answers to all of this are just not going to be very satisfactory. And then when it's all said and done, you've got a decision. Can you live with that or not? And if you can't live with that, then maybe you got to watch the ball drop on New Year's Eve. But at a certain point, that's the decision every fan's got to have here, is that the discussion is just going to leave some people frustrated. But we're going to have it, and we're going to do it, and then we're going to get ready for Michigan after that. So glad to have you with us here on a very weird day. Georgia's in the college football playoff for the second time, but most folks still feeling a little frustrated, more than a little frustrated, a lot frustrated about what happened there on Saturday after an embarrassing loss to Alabama in the SEC Championship. So let's cover all the bases. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So let me tell you a few things that I believe. I believe that Saturday was awful. And as a fan of this team, I was just devastated, because while I didn't go into the game feeling as confident as some of you did, I did think Georgia was going to win the game. I thought the way in which Georgia had played all season long was speaking to its chances of getting that done. And when it doesn't happen, I mean, it was just miserable. And in the game there on Saturday, I joke about being a member of the coastal elite broadcast media. I'm sitting in the press box, and in the press box, you got to be, level of decorum, professionalism, which I'm fine with. But I do get very anxious sitting in there. I get tied in knots and things like that. So I had to try to change the energy for a while on Saturday. Left the press box, went and found some Georgia fans to sit with, and tried to just see if I could, by moving my body, move the way the game was going. And no, that didn't quite work out either. It was just an awful night. And I haven't been happy really since then. Most Georgia fans kind of feel the same way. But concurrent to that, there's also the excitement of going to Miami, facing Michigan in the college football playoff, being back in the playoff for a second time. Going into Saturday, I said this yesterday, we were doing our Chase the Championship show, that there have only been 28 playoff spots ever awarded before yesterday. Only been like 11 teams before yesterday that ever earned one. The idea that Georgia gets a chance to do that again is a pretty cool thing, and eventually all of DawgNation will realize that. But if you sort of read the room well today, you realize that most Georgia fans aren't quite ready to talk about that yet. So since this is a show for fans, I'm going to try to reflect the fan conversation today as well as I possibly can. Before we get excited about Miami, before we talk about what Georgia still has in front of it in the month to come, and hopefully into January there too, let's spend a little bit of time talking about what went wrong against the Alabama Crimson Tide on Saturday. Something else that I believe is the main reason why, most important issue that Georgia faced this past weekend against the Crimson Tide, is that the greatest defense in the country, and I do believe it was the best defense in the country without a doubt, without a question, but it had almost impossible task of stopping Alabama on Saturday. Bryce Young got whatever he wanted. Jamison Williams got whatever he wanted from the receiver position. Even with John Mechie leaving the game with an injury, it was still, until the late stage of the game, virtually impossible, seemingly, to stop anything that Alabama wanted to do through the air. And when you look at why Georgia lost the game, if you could only pick one thing to say, that's the thing that you would say more so than anything else. And I'm sure Kirby and the staff frustrated about that. I'm sure they'll spend the next few weeks hoping to make the next time better than the last time. But on Saturday, it just simply wasn't good enough. Yet once again, if I'm going to do a good job of reflecting the fan conversation, it's also fair to point out that when Alabama built its lead, when it showed up in a big way offensively, that Georgia could not really do much to match that offensive firepower. That the defense may have been the main reason Georgia lost, but the offense, especially the offense through the air, was very slow in keeping up with how well Alabama was playing. And fairly or not, the quarterback conversation has dominated fan chatter after Saturday night. So I'm just going to put it out there. We're just going to do this here for a little bit. We're going to try to figure out exactly what's going on with Georgia in the quarterback situation. And then after that, we'll turn the page and hopefully get ready to enjoy a great month and hopefully get ready to enjoy a really fun Orange Bowl win, the college football playoff against the Michigan Wolverines. But for now, there are a lot of fans that kind of wonder what is going on. Specifically, they wonder why there doesn't seem to be much consideration to play JT Daniels, who was the starting quarterback for this team in the beginning of the year. And by now, you've heard me say this a lot. That Smart treated Daniels differently than he's treated almost any quarterback he's had in the Smart era, dating back to his time here in 2016. You know, he's been very slow to want to name starting quarterbacks, identify starting quarterbacks. He's been very slow to want to do that. But going into this season, before spring practice began, right around the time that spring practice was starting, he was very open, very willing to say that JT Daniels is our guy. This is the guy that has proven with his body of work he's going to be our starting quarterback. And sometime over the course of this season, that just changed. And all of a sudden now, even when Stetson Bennett struggled on Saturday the way that he did, all of a sudden now, Daniels doesn't seem to be much of a consideration. Inserting Daniels in for Bennett doesn't seem to be much of a thought. And Smart doesn't seem to be all that willing to offer much as far as an explanation as to why. Let me give you a couple of examples. Smart on Saturday night in the post-game press conference, with fan chatter just blowing up all over the internet about the fact that Smart needed to take Stetson Bennett out of the game, put JT Daniels in the game. Smart was asked about, as you move forward towards the college football playoff, is this a decision that you will consider making? Will you consider making that quarterback swap? And Kirby Smart essentially kind of shrugged off the whole question. This is Kirby from Saturday.
We have a decision to make every week at every position, but I have the utmost confidence in Stetson Bennett and think he did some really nice things tonight, but we go and reevaluate everything all the time. But, he played well, and it's tough environment we put him in defensively, and we have to be able to run the ball and have a little bit of semblance of balance. And I felt like there was times tonight that we were getting into a scoring contest because our defense didn't get stops. And you don't want to have to do that. But I certainly have a lot of confidence in Stetson, and I have a lot of confidence in JT too.
I think a lot of what Smart says there is probably right, that one of the big issues for Georgia offensively was either by choice or by force, they just didn't run the ball very much, weren't able to do that. A lot of fans thought, well, it's a conservative game plan from Kirby Smart. But the truth is, a lot of what happened there on Saturday was throwing the ball way more than Smart probably went into the game wanting to do. And a lot of that was kind of dictated by the way in which Alabama was playing, scoring at will. All of a sudden, Georgia did feel like it kind of got into that track meet, that shootout game against Alabama right there. But then yesterday, Smart was also a part of a press conference kind of previewing the Orange Bowl. However, most of the questions that Smart faced with those Orange Bowl folks were about what had happened the night before in the loss to Alabama. And this is the kind of thing a lot of Georgia fans are just not going to like. But it is a part of the record. You do need to hear this. Smart was asked directly. So you sort of shrugged off the notion of making that quarterback switch going into the Orange Bowl. Doesn't mean he won't do that, but he certainly didn't acknowledge that's a thought process that he's considering right now. How about during the game? with Georgia struggling to match what Alabama's doing offensively, did you think about making that switch during the game? And this is what Smart said yesterday afternoon during his Orange Bowl preview press conference.
As far as the stats and JT question, no, we never discussed that on the headphones last night. And, obviously we have to play better in a lot of areas, but to put any part of that blame or all that blame on Stetson, there's a lot more to it than that. And we got to play better around him. We got to play better on special teams, defense, and really all facets of the game. There were some really, really, really good throws last night by Stetson. Some throws that only his guy could catch the ball, and he made some good plays. And we got to continue to work on the poor decisions and a couple of the throws there that were picked off.
There's a part of me that, and listen, I loved Bobby Cox as the former Braves manager, but there's a part of me that feels like Kirby Smart sounds like the way that Bobby Cox used to sound in some of his press conferences when his starting pitcher may have gotten drilled in a playoff game or something like that. Oh, listen, we thought he pitched pretty well. Just a pitch here, pitch there. It's a totally different ball game. And, sometimes statements like that have a way of feeling too casual when Bobby Cox would have said that when Brian Snicker sometimes says some of the same kind of stuff now. And for Kirby Smart there's an idea that what he says there in describing all of this just sort of feels a little bit too casual. I get that. Now, one thing that he says that I kind of agree with is that ultimately, even though some of the personal shots that Bennett takes sometimes, some of the, I would say, below-the-belt cheap stuff that some fans throw out there at him is kind of related to his stature, his physical limitation, things like that. I mean, ultimately, the way that Bennett hurt you on Saturday, and I truly believe this is true, and Smart acknowledges it there, is not about not being big enough or strong enough arm or things like that. He just made some bad decisions. And ultimately, when Bennett has gotten Georgia in trouble, that's really been the thing. It's his decision-making, not any kind of physical limitation, even though as a recruit, he's former walk-on, and that's been well documented by now. But the thing that has hurt Bennett in the big games, I don't believe has been anything physical. I believe it's been his just decision-making. That's been the thing that's kind of hurt him more than anything else. But when you hear those two quotes from Kirby Smart, I don't think you can determine anything else other right now than the fact that they're just not considering playing JT Daniels. And maybe that changes sometime over the course of this month, but for now, Daniels just does not appear to be an option. Fairly or not, that just seems to be what this is. So let me take a couple minutes here for something. I'm going to try to do this as quick as I can. Can we try to figure out why? I mean, can we try to figure out what this is? Because all of this, I've said this so many times over the course of the last few weeks, I am not going to pretend this is not weird. Of course it's weird that the guy you named as the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season has now been replaced by a former walk-on, a player from a recruiting standpoint of a much less of a stature than the player profile that Daniels brought in. Of course this is weird. But just because it's weird doesn't mean it's wrong. But of course this is a little bit weird. So let's just do the best we can to figure out, and this is going to leave most of us unsatisfied, but let's try to read between the lines on this. Let's try to figure some of this out. Let's just try to figure out kind of where all of this is. And as I've said, to me, the most interesting chapter in all of this recently is that game for Georgia against Tennessee, the game that was on CBS. Remember this? This is, Georgia up there in Knoxville, winning the game, pulling away late. And there was the conversation between Jamie Erdahl, the sideline reporter. It was Gary Danielson, the analyst, and obviously Brad Nessler, the play-by-play voice. And they were talking about JT Daniels. And the phrasing that they use, the chatter that they use, I think for a lot of people was a little bit of an eye-opener, because it seems like they were having a little bit more of a candid discussion about what might be happening with Daniels than maybe some of what had been happening around the Athens community over the course of the last couple of months. So as we try to decipher, if Daniels really isn't an option, then when did that become so? When did it become true that JT Daniels is not apparently even a consideration to play for Georgia right now? Let's go back to the Tennessee game a few weeks ago. This is audio from the CBS broadcast. Take a listen.
They get kind of tired of trying to tackle number 3 late in the game. Jamie?
Well, you mentioned potential seeing JT Daniels here in the fourth quarter. There's a lot of commentary about this quarterback dynamic, and Kirby Smart has maintained confidence in both of these quarterbacks, and I feel it's important to tell everybody that the dynamic between Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels on the sideline is truly leaving Stetson as the starter. JT JT supports him in a way that all quarterbacks do, talking over indicators of coverage and what they're seeing. But it's not as if these two are still battling. The team understands that this is Stetson's spot, and JT is working with him hand in hand.
We saw JT's parents, Steve and Allie, outside the hotel this morning as Zaire White's going to get another first down and get into Tennessee territory. This is the first week that he's felt good enough. There's his mom and dad. You can't look more like your dad than you. He does. He does. But they said that this week, Jordan Palmer, his personal quarterback guru, coach, whatever you want to call it, flew into Athens, and they kind of went through all his mechanics and all that, trying to get ready for the end of the season.
So now JT Daniels has to be ready. Is there going to be a game? You know, when is it? Is it going to be the SEC championship game or playoff game where they may need him? And that's the discipline he has to do. He owes it to his teammates to be ready if it's needed.
So there was a lot about that got some attention at the time. We talked about this on the show when it happened. Nessler saying this was the first week that Daniels felt ... and he didn't finish the sentence. You know, the idea that Jordan Palmer came in that week to work on his throwing mechanics, it's a long way to travel. You certainly can't do that each and every week. That in itself felt, a little bit weird with all of that. But ultimately, you couldn't really tell what was going on with Daniels because of that, but the way in which Erdahl and Danielson and Nessler spoke about it led you to believe that something was kind of going on with JT Daniels leading to that game. So last week, and most of you know this, we had Brad Nessler from CBS Sports on our show DawgNation Daily. And so what I asked Brad last week was, hey, when y'all talked about Daniels during the CBS broadcast, it certainly seemed like y'all felt like that you had been made aware of some information that you thought was interesting. And so I just asked, Nessler point blank, based on the conversations that you've had, why do you think that Stetson Bennett's been playing, and as of late, Daniels hasn't been playing at all? I'm going to break this up into two clips, but this is Nessler offering an explanation for kind of what he's learned about Daniels, and the genesis for this was the clip from the CBS broadcast you just heard. Here's the first one from Nessler.
That's a loaded question. Yeah, I think if Stetson would have struggled at any point, I think and JT was healthy at the right point, they probably would have switched. I think you just got to the point where you're going, man, this is not broken. And I've kind of always been in Stetson Bennett's corner, not against JT Daniels at all. I mean, I think he's a good kid and a great quarterback and all of that. But how do you pull a guy? I kind of think back, and this goes way back, and people aren't going to realize this, that your young listeners won't get this. But the year the Dolphins went undefeated and won the Super Bowl, Bob Greasy got credit for that, and he's one of my great friends and a great partner for 10 years. That probably helped him get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Earl Morrall played most of that season at quarterback. And that's how they won about 14 of those 17 games,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're maybe not always the five-star guy, but as far as I'm concerned, Stetson Bennett's been a five-star performer. So it's just, man, let him keep playing.
So the phrase that Nessler uses there that sticks out to me is, and admittedly I'm reading into this a little bit, but the notion that if Daniels could have been healthy at the right time, he may have been more of a consideration to return as Georgia's starting quarterback. And that leads me to believe, and as I said before, I'm reading into this a little bit, but that leads me to believe that a lot of what's has gone on with Daniels must have been health related. Not to say that he's not healthy now, but when Georgia made its consideration for who its quarterback down the stretch was going to be, maybe there's a chance that Daniels at the time just wasn't healthy enough to be the guy they felt like turning to. And when it comes to the reps that you have to split up in practice, this notion that you can split up reps and have a quarterback ready enough to go on a Saturday, that's probably not as easy to do as sometimes we assume that it is, because if you're splitting up reps too much, then the quarterback that ultimately starts for you is only half as ready to play as he otherwise could have been. Listening to Nessler there, kind of leads you to beve that Daniels' health has been a part of this discussion, even if he is healthy now. But it's actually the second part of what Nessler said when he was on DawgNation Daily on Thursday that I think is the most eye-opening here, because this is the part where he really gets into what was going on there on that CBS telecast from the Tennessee game when the Daniels conversation came up. There was something that Nessler said on our show on Thursday that really got my attention. In light of everything that's going on with the quarterback right now, this is certainly worth hearing from Thursday's edition of our program.
and as going back to running into Steve and Allie Daniels, it was just outside our hotel, and we were talking, and at that time they were really excited. They thought that he was going to see. I think his dad said significant more reps, which is football terminology for all of us, and especially a dad of a quarterback. And so, they thought he was going to play a lot that day, and he didn't. I don't think he played at all. And so I'm sure they were disappointed. But, they said that week that Jordan Palmer had been in Athens, and he's kind of JT's quarterback guru. He does that with a lot of players in college and pro football. And he had been in town, and they'd gone through all his mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So, he was fired up to play that day, and they expected him to play a lot. And that's where that story came from. It's just kind of a chance meeting outside a hotel.
So I find this to be fascinating. And here's where I'm different than some of you. Like, some of you have watched what played out on Saturday for Georgia, the quarterback spot, and said, hey, Georgia definitely needs to make a change. Georgia definitely needs to insert JT Daniels, definitely needs to do this, and Kirby Smart's not doing this because he's so stubborn. Like, that's where I'm different than some of you. I am absolutely willing to consider that Smart, knowing far more about this situation than I do, is making the right choice. Even if it's the weird choice, it may not necessarily be wrong. I am totally open to the idea that Smart's making the right choice here when it comes to playing Bennett over Daniels because of reasons that Smart might know for all of this. And the other thing that I'm never going to do is, when there's a situation that I don't fully understand, my immediate response is not going to be to assume the worst. That Smart's not doing this because of ego. Smart's not doing this because of his stubbornness. I'm not going to necessarily assume the worst as far as why something's playing out in kind of a weird way. Something's kind of playing out in a way that I don't have much of an explanation for. I'm not going to do that. But the one thing I think we can all agree on, whether it's the right choice or the wrong choice to play Bennett over Daniels, the one thing we can all agree on is this. Kirby Smart has not done a good job of explaining this. And when Georgia's winning games, when it's 12-0, when it's blowing everybody out, it's kind of easy to sort of shrug all that off and say, that's just Kirby being Kirby. He likes giving it to the media. He likes keeping everything a secret. He runs a tight ship. All of that's very easy to explain away and ignore as long as he's stacking up wins, one right after the other. And to his credit, he's stacked up a lot of wins. But when Georgia loses a game on Saturday, and when quarterback's at least part of the story, even if it isn't the main reason Georgia lost the game, all of a sudden those quirky personality traits of excessively secretive and things like that, all of a sudden those traits don't quite seem so endearing anymore. And it's one thing for me, blowhard that yells into a microphone for a living, not to know what's going on. It's even another thing for the average fan to not really feel like he knows what's going on. But it's a little bit eye-opening that apparently JT Daniels himself doesn't know what's going on either. Because according to Nessler, Daniels went into the Tennessee game thinking he was going to play, and then he didn't. The disconnect here is not just between blowhards in the media and the average fan and Smart. There may be a little bit of a disconnect between Daniels and Smart himself there too. So ultimately, the decision to play Bennett or Daniels rests with Smart, with influence by guys like Todd Monken, and we have every reason to believe that Smart's going to make the choice that's in the best interest of UGA. But as he does that, it would probably serve him well to maybe explain his reasoning a little bit better. If not to you and me, then maybe the quarterback's involved. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily quarterback. Yeah, I've got quarterback on the brain, I guess, a little bit right now. It's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're happy to have you with us today, no matter how you get to us, live on video, 9:45 for our first and 15 at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, the Apple Player, Spotify, the Google Player, posting the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really happy to have you with us. And before I shout out and give a hello to my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia, let me say this. That I think when you kind of put the quarterback stuff out there, when you kind of say what needs to be said about that, eventually it does become easier to turn the page. And it's maybe a little easier for me to turn the page than it is for some other people, but eventually everybody will turn the page. There will be happier days again for Georgia football. There just will be. Folks will be excited about Michigan. They'll be excited about the college football playoff. It's a game that Georgia's expected to win, even if you don't quite trust the odds makers right now. There will be happy days again, but it's almost like you can't fully enjoy what's to come until you do your full level of catharsis on what went wrong there. And so today we're going to give folks a chance to do that. We're going to try to thread that needle here pretty thin all the way around and, see if we can figure out how to look ahead and have a good time, but also look back and let folks kind of have their say about the situation from Saturday. Of course, our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia make it all possible. They equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. And this is just one of the things right now that's so important because we're in a time in which energy bills are expensive. And, the heat that's running around your house, that's one of those things that you don't want that escaping out. You don't want that energy, leaving your home. You want to keep it in there where it's nice and toasty and warm on a cold winter night, which we've had a lot of those here lately. I had a great lunch the other day with our friends from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I love what they're doing. Got a beautiful showroom. We're going to be talking to you more about that coming up in the weeks to come. Just an unbelievable place for you to really kind of get in there and kind of lay hands on some of the options that you have available to you, exterior doors and entry doors and, great looking windows, things like that. Pella Window and Door of Georgia has got a lot coming for you when it comes to all of that. Can't wait to tell you about a lot of this kind of stuff coming up here in the new year there as well. Also, great savings is a fun thing to be able to do for you there too. So make sure you check out Pella Window and Door of Georgia for all of that, including right now you can get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 24 months. That's a great way to get great savings on something you need. Better windows and doors for your home there. You get that there. Also a great way to get in touch. How about PellaofGA.com/DawgNation? That's PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. All right, we're going to do a very quick version of Around the Doghouse, and we're going to get John Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. We'll talk to John about, obviously, a lot that's going on with the dogs here right now. But first, though, it's Around the Doghouse, and it's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, the other big thing that came out, and I mentioned this, just kind of briefly off the top, is you got to play better defensively, really in all games. Certainly, think about Michigan in the college football playoff, Alabama after that. But you just got to find a way to get more stops. You just do. And I think it's unreasonable to say, well, you're going to hold Alabama to 13 points. You're probably not going to do that. Certainly that's probably not going to be a reasonable expectation. But is it reasonable to expect Georgia to get a few more stops than it did Saturday? Yeah, it is. In fact, I think Saturday's game could have felt different. If you got a couple more stops, a couple key moments, if you could find a way to get that defense off the field a couple more times, even Saturday's game could have felt like a far different result had you been able to do that. And the one thing I'm not going to do is try to pretend to be something I'm not, because the honest truth is, I'm not smart enough to tell you what you do. I mean, there were a couple things on Saturday where Young was so good, where obviously Jamison, the wide receiver, was so good. I was just kind of left throwing up my hands. I really don't know how you stop this. I mean, the one thing I think it becomes easy to say, even if I can't really quite prescribe how it gets done, is you do have to get more quarterback pressure. We knew that even when Georgia was at its best, if it had any vulnerability whatsoever, it might be through the air with those big time passing plays. That if Georgia had any vulnerability, that might be the area that could be exploited. And that's not going to change between now and the end of the season. So therefore, you've got to do everything you can to mitigate that, everything you can do to negate that as a disadvantage, which means that you just got to try to find a way to get him on the ground. And if you can play him again, you got to do that. You can't let him stand there and pick you apart, because he showed you on Saturday that is exactly what he will do. And that's no easy task. It is no easy task getting to Bryce Young. But if Georgia's lucky enough to play them again, that's the way that's going to have to go down. So hopefully for Georgia, and we're going to spend a lot of the month talking about this, against Michigan, it can earn its way to that Alabama rematch. I don't expect the Crimson Tide to have an issue with Cincinnati. So hopefully Georgia can earn its way into that rematch in that opportunity and have a better result the next time around. I certainly am open to the possibility that will be the case and can be the case. But obviously a lot that went wrong on Saturday has to be reversed by the time these two teams play again, if they indeed do. That is Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, I love having AAA a part of what we're doing here on DawgNation Daily each and every day on this program. When I'm traveling a lot, and, this time of year I am doing a lot of that kind of traveling and things like that, it is just really fun to just be a part of everything they have going on there. So one of the things that also, in addition to the legendary roadside assistance that AAA provides, they're also the name to know for auto insurance there as well. This is a new website that I want to make sure you know about. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. A great looking website that provides you all the options that are available to you when it comes to your auto insurance needs. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. You can also give them a call, 866-380-1637. That's 866-380-1637. And you can find out about how you can switch and save with AAA today. Big savings, a lot of extra money in your pocket. AAA provides all of that for you. So make sure you check them out. AAA.com/auto insurance for a lot more of that there today. All right, good to have you with us on the program today. As I've said now a couple of times, there will be happier days to come around here. Today is not necessarily one of those, but we will obviously be very excited about the college ball playoff eventually. And the truth is, I'm already excited about it here today. I mean, I've already done, seems like 15 hours of programming since the game on Saturday. So for the most part, I've sort of spit out everything that I had to spit out. But I wanted to give the DawgNation Daily audience its chance to have its voice in all of this. And we'll, on video, read some of your comments later on. A lot of you sharing your thoughts on social media there too. So we'll cover all those bases today. But a lot of you also want to hear what John Stinchcomb has to say about all of this. His thoughts, what went wrong against Alabama, what can go better next time, and a little bit of a preview for an Orange Bowl, a spot that Georgia hasn't been in quite some time. Let's do it all right now. Classic City Lager Insider Update. Great to welcome John Stinchcomb here to DawgNation Daily, and great to have all of you with us too.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
John, some days on the show, more fun than others. This is probably an example of the latter here. Not a lot of fun talking about a day on Saturday that was just really pretty rough from the word go. Alabama putting a lot of pressure on Georgia with its ability to just strike from the air. And the explosive offense that the Crimson Tide's become famous for was as good Saturday as probably it's been, certainly in big game situations. And Georgia just really had no answer for it on either side of the ball. I know you're as disappointed about it as I am. I guess just give me your initial thoughts here, and then we'll kind of drill down on some of the issues beyond that. But what was it like taking all this in on Saturday?
Sure. Like most dogs, we're all licking our wounds today, right? You're questioning everything, and you're going, how could it turn out the way that it did? There were such high expectations going into this game, and really you saw this as an opportunity, and I think rightfully so, that this Alabama team isn't built the exact same way that we've seen so many times before, and Georgia has the roster to finally overcome that hill that's been so high to climb. But yet it seemed to play out very similar to ways in the past where Alabama looked like the superior team. So with that said, having seen that game and understand a little bit better understanding of how it played out, I think there were some just missed opportunities. And, like many others, I was kind of quick to jump to point some fingers and say there were some individual efforts that fell short of where we need to be. And, I think you're trying to look for drastic changes, like, golly, maybe we need to revamp things. But I don't think that's the case. Having tried to settle down and really hone in on what went wrong, I think there's some easy things to point to. I think what got Georgia to this opportunity was incredible execution and playing at a high level and not missing very many tackles. And the very first two things that stand out from this performance is busted coverages, something that we haven't seen very much of Georgia, and missed tackles. I mean, that's two things that we've hung our hat on all season long. That have defined and really put this defensive group in that conversation in one of the best ever. And then on one of the biggest stages, especially the biggest stage for the season, that just wasn't how it played out. It wasn't who Georgia was on Saturday, and I think that's probably the biggest surprise from that game.
I'm not smart enough to know how you defend what Alabama did well, but to me it seems pretty simple that, and I hear people say this in the NFL all the time, that you're going to have to keep sending pass rushers until you finally get to them. And I realize that leaves you all very exposed, on the back end when, the more and more aggressive you get there. But it's pretty clear that what happened on Saturday didn't work. It was I don't know. It just seemed a little soft. It seemed a little too easy for Young. That even if you accelerate your own demise, it seems like Georgia's got to really take it to him more next time. And as I said before, I'm not going to pretend to be smart enough to devise a game plan here because I'm not. But that's what my eyes were telling me on Saturday is, man, you just got to keep dialing it up until you get to him, even if you're taking an incredible risk by doing so. I'm oversimplifying it, John, but that's the one thing I had on my mind as I was watching it.
Yeah, I think it was a progression. I think we witnessed a progression in thought from the defensive side of the ball as the game played on. I think the initial hope was that we as a defense could affect the passer with four rushers. And as the game progressed, that wasn't the case. Outside of Neal, I thought we had an advantage, our defensive front against their offensive line, and that wasn't the case. Especially, on our defensive left, across from them on the right side, we were ineffective. So then you start adding more pressure. We've started bringing linebackers in the middle, something that we've done really well with in games, and Alabama was picking that up. I mean, I credit our linebackers as really good pass rushers, and we weren't getting home, and when we did, we didn't bring him down. So there was a lot of line games that we were running where the defensive tackle and defensive ends were twisting. And when that defensive tackle gets outside, you become the contain guy. If you don't contain Bryce Young, he'll make you pay, and he did time and time again. So when we're dialing up these pressures, more and more so, you saw more in that second half, you got to get home. You got to affect that passer. Otherwise, you're putting your secondary in a position where they're more vulnerable. I mean, it's hard when you don't have extra bodies on that back end to keep tight coverage. And I think that's what we saw. Bryce had more time against the pressure than our defense is used to, and it put more pressure on that back end, and Alabama made us pay for it.
A lot of quarterback talk before you join us today, and that's obviously been the thing that has dominated the fan chatter since then. And I made it pretty clear that I believe that it was the defensive failings and not quarterback that was the main reason that Georgia lost on Saturday. But certainly in the comparison to Alabama, quarterback is one of the spots where Georgia appears to be inferior right now. So I think it's fair to have the discussion. And, John, I'm totally open to the idea that Kirby Smart's playing the right guy between Bennett and Daniels. Just because it's a weird choice doesn't mean it's the wrong choice. Smart knows far more about this than I do, and I have certainly every reason to believe that he'd make the most logical choice based on his understanding of the situation. I just wish he was better at explaining it. I really do, because when Smart kind of shrugs off the question and almost to a degree gaslights people about even asking stuff like this, I think he actually ends up making things worse on both Bennett and Daniels. I think people end up being harder on Bennett because of their frustrations. I think people conjure up these reasons why Daniels might not be playing, and all of this could be solved if Smart could be just a little bit more forthright on this. I'm not going to pretend that Smart owes us everything, whether it be fans, media, or whatever else, but boy, it seems like a little more information and a little bit more acknowledgement of what seems to be the common opinion of a large number of people. It seems like that would serve this whole issue a little bit better. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's the problem. I think it's created controversy where it didn't need to be. Let's take that 30,000-foot view of team identity and how this year, 2021 Georgia Bulldogs, how we're built. We're built with defense first. Don't turn the ball over. We're going to be able to run the ball and play action pass. And that fits Stetson's game well. And when you get into a game where the defense hasn't kind of held up to their end of the expectation, at least, with how games play out, and you get down 2 scores or even 3 scores, something that's unheard of for this year, and you're trying to make your offense something that they're not accustomed to, which is straight up spread. I mean, spread's a part of the package, but purely pocket passing, spread offense, that's not Stetson's game. And so I think some of that is a little unjust in just his evaluation, because if we're going to pick players there's a number of guys that we can highlight. I mean, obviously, Stetson's the quarterback. It's the marquee player. Everyone knows he's going to be under more pressure than anyone else on that field. And through a costly pick six, that pretty much put that last nail in the coffin for Georgia on Saturday. But, if we're playing this game of let's pick one player and highlight where he screwed up, there's plenty of blame to go around. And the way Georgia is built this year, I think it fits how Stetson plays and the way the game is supposed to be structured for Georgia to find success. Those things marry well. It certainly didn't on Saturday, and he's not the only one to blame.
So here is where, I mean, a lot of people don't want to hear this today, but I still think Georgia can win a rematch. And I still think Georgia can win a rematch playing with the team that played on Saturday. And maybe they won't, but it's not like I'm going to spend the rest of the month hiding under a bed here. I mean, Georgia played awful on Saturday, but there are a lot of guys who are, I would assume, chomping at the bit to do like Bryce Young did. The Alabama performance against Auburn wasn't so great either, and a lot of very good players redeemed themselves with how they played against Georgia. To think that there's not guys on the Georgia side that wouldn't like to do the same thing in a potential January showdown, of course they would. There are a lot of folks out there going to tell you today that that Georgia's doomed to get slaughtered by Alabama again if they have that rematch. Maybe that's the case, but I'm not conceding anything right now, John. Even in a moment like this where the mood seems as dark as it possibly could be, I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I still think Georgia could potentially win here. What do you think about the potential of a UGA-Alabama rematch?
I look forward to it. Now, priority one is beat Michigan, and candidly, I think that's a good matchup for us, just the way that Michigan's structured with their run first. I think our defensive line has proved time and time again that we're effective against a traditional run first offense. Now, let's move on to Alabama, at least for this discussion.
Yeah.
And the campaign's got to be stop the 8, right? You can't let 8 in a row from Alabama occur for this Georgia team and really this Georgia program, because this team isn't responsible for the 7 losses that we've taken on the chin from Alabama in the last times we've played. But to do that, I think we double down on who we are, and that's not something that we put on display on Saturday. I think we got away from who we were. I think, the failure to execute on defense, the allowance of so many points. Let's be honest. What hurt us most? They've got 2 marquee, high-level players on that offensive unit, and Bryce Young, you give that man time, whether it's in the pocket or what he creates for once he leaves it. That's what hurt us most. And they've got a high level elite wide receiver in Jamison. So those 2 players dictated the outcome of the game on Saturday in my mind, and we cannot let that happen. And when we bring pressure. And there was times where we had a hand on Bryce and could not bring him down. That can't happen. You just can't let that happen. The other 2 things that really stick out to me is third down conversion and red zone. Any offense, when you come back, those are 2 of the main statistics that you're going to look at. And, early on, just going through, there's a couple of key ones, offensive and defensively, that stood out to me. Early that first series where George Pickens slips coming out of his route, or A.D. Mitchell, that either short arming it or doesn't get his head around on it slant. Later in the second half, where that's another failed third down conversion. And you look at Alabama's conversions, and Devontae Wyatt misses a tackle. Who I'm a huge Devontae Wyatt fan, so it's not like I'm bagging on these guys, but there's individual plays that you can look at and say, we're in position here. We're in position to succeed. And, everybody gets thrown under the bus when you lose like this, coaching included. But to me, given the opportunities, I think some will play out different, and you'll just make different decisions next time around. But I think it's important, first and foremost, to get that opportunity back, and that means beating Michigan.
It is our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb here right now. And, of course, it was great to have the folks at Classic City Lager out with us this past Thursday. We were at Marlowe's Tavern, and so many of you have been enjoying that all season long. In fact, I heard from a few of you there on Saturday in and around Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you were enjoying some classic city lager during your tailgate, and I'm certainly glad about that because I love it. It's from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a taste of Athens. I like it when I can't be in Athens. I like having a little Athens close to me, and that's certainly what classic city lager reminds me of from our friends at Creature Comforts. You got a lot of holiday parties coming up right now, a lot of fun things you're doing with friends, family, loved ones, everything in between. Classic city lager is a great addition to any gathering this time of year. You can pick it up wherever you're doing your shopping, available in 6 and 12-pack cans all year long, 365 days a year. It's a craft-style lager. It means it's got a really unique flavor. It's delicious, even though it's a lager-style beer, lighter in color, but there is no sacrifice in flavor when it comes to this craft-style lager. It's classic city lager from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It is good, cold beer. So try yourself some today. So, John, in the little bit of time we have left, I'm sure you're like the rest of us. You're trying to kind of catch up here on exactly what Michigan brings to the table. The one thing, and I believe you touched on this a moment ago, it is a team that probably mirrors Georgia a little bit more than maybe some other teams you might expect to play in the college football playoff. Certainly if it had been Ohio State, that's a little bit more like the Alabama-type team. This Michigan team probably beat Ohio State using a Georgia-style game plan, albeit in their own stadium. There was certainly a lot of weather there that day. But, given the fact that these are not quite mirror images of each other, but at least a little bit more similarities between these two opponents, what's your early take on the Georgia-Michigan matchup in the Orange Bowl?
Well, I think it's more conventional. I think it's one of those physicality-first games where the trenches matter more. And I think that, again, swings back to the favor of Georgia and the way this team is built. When Georgia has struggled, it's because of elite quarterback play and really high-end wide receivers. I think historically you could point to a number of games where that's the case. I don't think that's how Michigan's built, just based on the 2, 3, 4 games that I've seen them play. Now, they play physical, they play disciplined, they play passionate football. They've got good players. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason why they're in the college football playoffs, and there are no rollover. There's no cupcake games left. But if you're looking at the matchup, I think it's much more favorable than a Heisman Trophy most likely winning quarterback and a receiver that has the ability that Jameson Williamson does. So is the matchup better? At least it is on paper in my mind. But Michigan's a good team, and they're playing good football. This is the time of year where you want to play good football. Now, what's crazy about college football is you have 3.5 weeks between your last game and when you pick things back up at the end of the month. So that's a lot of time. It's a lot of time to kind of lose rhythm and that motor that's you got finely tuned. That's a lot of practice time without getting back on the field when it really counts. And there's good there, there's pros and there's cons. And I think the teams that manage that best, you're going to be able to identify pretty easily once it gets to kickoff.
Yeah, John, I think that's exactly right. I certainly appreciate you being here today. I've loved your insight throughout this entire run here towards the postseason. I know we'll get a chance to hear a lot more from you in the weeks to come there, too. But just great stuff all the way around. Thank you for being here today as a part of our Classic City Lager Insider Update. Really good stuff, and we will certainly look forward to seeing you again really soon. John, thanks so much for that. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I'll say it's always great to be a dog. And for the fans that weren't able to be in the stands, I think there's something that's noteworthy that's worth sharing. And that's towards the end of the game, fourth quarter, game's pretty much in hand. And there is a senior leader walking down the sideline. He's pretty easy to notice. It's Jordan Davis. And he's tapping the bottom side of his chin with the back side of his hand, saying, "Keep your chin up." Okay. And I think that's the perspective that this team has, that they're not going to duck their heads and tuck their tails and say, we're just inferior to Alabama and we don't belong at the top of the heap. And that message, I think, is probably going to resonate pretty loudly in the halls of the Buttsmere, as this team has, the rest of the month to build on what they have, what they've established up to this point, and clean up the mistakes that they've made this past Saturday. So it was really encouraging to me. It's kind of an insight and a window into the mindset of the leadership of that team and where their heads are at. So I think that's very much worth sharing to the rest of the Dog Nation.
John, that's great stuff. Thanks for being here today. Certainly appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Go Dogs.
Good stuff there from John Stinchcomb. I also want to say this really quickly. John, as I said before, been a great part of everything we've done with Chase for the championship over the course of the last few weeks, including being at our Marlowe's Tavern event at Brookhaven this past Thursday. So much fun to have John, and I know dog fans had a great time interacting there. We said before, our friends at Classic City Lager were there at Marlowe's Tavern there on Thursday. And the other thing we got a chance to tell you about, we were at that spot that's been kind of our home away from home for a long time. We've loved events at the Marlowe's Tavern in Brookhaven. We've really been to a lot of the taverns there as well, but certainly the Marlowe's Tavern, this experience this past Thursday, that great holiday gift offer that's ongoing right now. And I'll make sure you're aware of this because we've all got these gifts we got to buy. It's not easy to do that sometimes. Well, a Marlowe's Tavern gift card is a great choice, and right now you get a great incentive if you buy one. If you buy the $50 Marlowe's Tavern gift card right now, they're going to give you a bottle of Michelle Brut sparkling wine as a way to say thank you there for that. It's a great way to ring in the new year, of course. And in addition to that, if you get the $100 gift card, not only do you get the Michelle Brut sparkling wine, but you also get a $20 complimentary gift card on top of that as a special thank you bonus. So stop by and see one of the taverns, the one right there in your neighborhood, or go to marlowstavern.com and find out how you can pick up this great offer. But a great gift card holiday gift idea from our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. A great way to head towards Christmas and everything else happening this month. And, of course, ringing in the new year there as well with our friends from Marlowe's Tavern.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So I have a little bit of a goal here as we head towards the end of the month. Between New Year's Eve and in Miami and then heading towards April when we're going to be on the Royal Caribbean cruise, my goal is I'd like to have a tan all winter long. Do you think I could pull this off? Do you think I could get tan in Miami in December and then stay tan through April when we're on the Royal Caribbean cruise? That's kind of my goal. I want this to be my tan winter. That's what I'm kind of hoping it can be there, and obviously hoping for some Georgia wins kind of go along with that. Obviously, if we're lucky enough to be in Indianapolis in January, that's not going to be so great on the old tan there. But I am looking forward to all that. By the way, imagine these Michigan folks coming up. Most of them are whiter than the wind-driven snow. You imagine how they're going to handle that sun down there in Miami when they get there come December. But obviously, we got a long way to go before we get there to that. But that's kind of what I'm hoping to. I'm hoping to sort of see that tan show up and stay there all winter long. And, of course, you're going to be talking about this Dog Nation cruise. Trust me when I tell you, this is the kind of thing you want to be a part of. I've really had a great time the last few days because I've heard a lot of you telling me that you plan on being on the Dog Nation cruise with us because you've heard me talking about all the great stuff happening with Royal Caribbean cruises all the time, whether you're on our cruise or your own Royal Caribbean cruise. Obviously, great ships, wonderful destinations. You've heard me talk about Perfect Day, Coco Cay, the private island that's right there in the Bahamas. When we go on our Dog Nation cruise, Perfect Day, Coco Cay, going to be one of the stops that we make on that cruise vacation. This is going to be so much fun. I've already heard from so many of you who are planning on being a part of it. You actually booked your travel there as well, which is certainly great news too. The easiest way for me to tell you to be a part of this is to simply go to DawgNation.com. There's a link right there at the top of the page where you can do all this. On sale now, your chance to go ahead and get your travel squared away to be with us April 25th to the 29th. Sailing on the beautiful Independence of the Seas. And we're going to Nassau, Bahamas. We're going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. We have some special Dog Nation themed events while on board. Fun. We're going to do like an NFL draft party, things like that. May have some special guests there as well. So much fun just being a part of one of the most magical vacations you can ever enjoy with our friends from Royal Caribbean. The Cruise and Vacation Authority is helping us book all of this. And if you go to DawgNation.com, you get a link there to them. So please be with us for the Dog Nation cruise. Now, let's cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. I'll give you a few thoughts here on some of these bowl matchups. We'll obviously do more of this in the time to come. Georgia is a favorite against Michigan right now. As I said before, a lot of you probably not all that in love with the odds makers, just given the fact that they got it wrong between Georgia and Alabama. But you've got the situation with Alabama and Cincinnati in the other playoff there in Dallas. No surprise, I guess, that Alabama chose Dallas. That's geographically a little closer for them anyway. And there'd been some chatter as of late that both Georgia and Alabama would have liked to have avoided Miami, maybe for a multitude of reasons, but obviously Georgia had that choice taken from them. As far as the rest of the SEC goes here, nice graphic by our producer, Michael Carvel. I think Ole Miss Baylor is a pretty fun Sugar Bowl, given the match of wits between the defensive-minded Dave Aranda, the offensive-minded Lane Kiffin. That's actually a pretty fun bowl game. My guess is there's a ton of Ole Miss fans who show up there in New Orleans for that. Fairly close drive and kind of an Ole Miss flavor to New Orleans anyway. Baylor folks were just there a couple of years ago. There's not a ton of those fans anyway. Kentucky, Iowa, and the Citrus Bowl. What's the total for this? Probably about 29 points. That may be the expected total there for that. Certainly... Certainly a 3 yards in a cloud of dust type game. Mike Leach against his old team, Texas Tech, in the Liberty Bowl. South Carolina versus North Carolina. These two teams seemingly have played a lot, and they played a lot, and Charlotte going to be playing again here right now. Tennessee gets bowl eligible in Josh Heupel's first year against Purdue. That should be a pretty fun game. Texas A&M Wake Forest in the Gator Bowl. Wake probably seems like the exact worst kind of team for A&M to play, just simply because A&M has shown you this season has a hard time scoring points. That's something that Wake Forest does very easily. Arkansas, Penn State's probably a pretty fun Outback Bowl there. LSU makes a bowl, the Texas Bowl against Kansas State. You've also got Missouri Army in the Fort Worth Bowl, or I should say the Armed Forces Bowl. Florida UCF is kind of a fun Gasparilla Bowl there, which is in Tampa, I believe. These are two teams that, try to negotiate playing. In the Danny White era as athletic director, did not want to play the 2-for-1 deal where Florida came to Orlando once and UCF went to Gainesville twice. And it seems obvious they should play, but they haven't. This is actually kind of a fun matchup between these two. And, of course, Auburn's in the Birmingham Bowl against Houston. I'm sure that's not exactly the most exciting thing for year one for Brian Harsin, but that's the case there. So, obviously the big story with the bowl is going to be who's playing, who's coaching. I mean, the crazy cycle that spins this time of year with college football news obviously impacts the college football postseason, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm still pretty excited about these bowl games all the way around. Some of these matchups I think are actually pretty good. So that's kind of this theme there when it comes to the SEC. Other news you're probably aware of, you may be aware of, let me tell you if you're not. So Jaden Hazelwood, former UGA commit, 5-star wide receiver at Oklahoma. He put his name in the transfer portal. We talked about this the other day. And I had suggested, I thought there was a chance that Georgia would have been interested in Hazelwood, probably more interested in Hazelwood than it maybe would have been in Zach Evans, the running back leaving TCU, another name we used to talk about all the time. Well, whether Georgia was interested or not, Hazelwood has pretty quickly landed at Arkansas. Now, there's a couple things here. There's a connection with Hazelwood on the Arkansas staff going back to his time at Cedar Grove. So that probably factors into this. But there's also going to be folks who remember the way in which Oklahoma seemingly utilized the transfer portal a year ago to take Mike Woods away from the Arkansas program. It seems like now Arkansas has kind of struck back with its own revenge, getting Hazelwood here. So this is Sam Pittman kind of doing what Sam Pittman's going to do, which is be a factor. Obviously making Arkansas a little bit more of a presence and a force in the recruiting trail. Long way to go on that because Chad Morris was the worst recruiter in the SEC as a head coach when he was there in Fayetteville, but Pittman's trying to change that, and also now apparently going to be a pretty big factor for transfer portal names there too. So that's pretty interesting. And an update on a story we've kind of followed now for a while. You wondered if Dan Lanning was going to emerge as a legit candidate at Oklahoma. And to be frank, I'm just never quite so sure how real this ever got. There were multiple media reports connecting Lanning's name to the Oklahoma job. Ultimately, it is defense that Oklahoma goes in the direction of for its next coaching hire, but it's not the Georgia DC, it's the Clemson DC. It's Brent Venables who's going back to a spot that he once called home. Venables now head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners. And boy, you talk about a big transformation. This is it. This is, Oklahoma getting away from what has really defined the program for a long time. Now, maybe Venables brings in a high-powered offensive guy, but that's always the extra step, right? When you hire defensive head coach, the most important thing for that defensive-minded head coach is the offensive hire that he makes, because we do know offensive football is so important right now. So there's going to be a little bit of a sea change, a little bit of of a perception transformation now for the Oklahoma program and for Brent Venables, who waited a long time to be a head coach, so much so that some folks wonder if there was some reason he wasn't being a head coach or that he never would be a head coach. Well, apparently the wait paid off for him because he gets one of the biggest jobs that exists in the sport. Venables going to Oklahoma. That means that Lanning for now is staying put, although the chatter that Lanning got around the Oklahoma job, kind of the same way that once a recruit gets an offer from, like, say, Georgia, all of a sudden there's 25 offers that come flooding in right after that. The coaching carousel might spin a little bit of the same kind of thing, in that now that Lanning seemingly was fairly deeply connected, at least in the reports and the rumors, to the Oklahoma job, maybe that causes his name to surface up for some of these other jobs there as well. So you might not be done sweating it out for Dan Lanning's future in Athens right now, but it's not the Oklahoma job he's going to be taking. There was like a weird rumor thing that popped up on Saturday. That was, you got to be careful about the fake news stuff, and that kind of was that there briefly a little bit on Saturday night. For the most part, I don't know that anybody really took the bait on that, but it's Venables going there. And then I guess one more quick thought on this. This is the big change that Dabo Swinney, for the most part, has avoided. And that's not the only big change potentially coming to the Clemson program right now. There's, thought Tony Elliott could be on his way out. There's obviously Brent Venables is gone now. There's been some chatter that Dan Radakovich, the Clemson athletic director, he could be looking to move on. There is a lot happening around Dabo Swinney right now. And he has enjoyed a lot of continuity, and he's put that continuity to good work. It's helped him build a very successful program at Clemson. I think it's a very interesting offseason for Clemson. Very interesting offseason. Now, by the end of this year, Clemson was actually playing much better football, and for the most part, weathered the storm of the early losses that program suffered. But now, it's a little bit of a tumultuous time to get ready for next season. And suddenly, Clemson doesn't quite have the same level of balance and stability to rest on that it's been enjoying, especially if Radakovich leaves. This could be kind of an interesting time to kind of observe whether Dabo Swinney can keep Clemson at the level that it's been on. One more thing to get to here. This is not really SEC related, although I guess it could have some impact on Georgia and the SEC a little bit. But there's been a lot of talk about Manny Diaz and the way in which he's being handled at Miami right now. So, and by the time any of you hear this, we may have more resolution on this. There's been some thought that Mario Cristobal, who knows the state of Florida very well, could be leaving Oregon and coming to Miami. He seems to be moving pretty slow on this. There were some incorrect rumors out there that he was going to inform his team yesterday afternoon that he was taking the Miami job. Coming to find out that was fake news. He was actually in San Diego, I believe, recruiting. Bob Stoops even kind of, I think, joked with him. Bob is, of course, the interim Oklahoma coach for the bowl game, and kind of joked with Cristobal about that. So there was no planned meeting with the team yesterday to let them know he was taking the Miami job. And while this is ongoing, remember, Miami doesn't have an athletic director right now either. And so you've got Manny Diaz traveling around the state of Florida recruiting right now, knowing that he's either going to be asked to keep his job or he's going to find out that Cristobal's taking the job, and therefore they're going to fire Diaz. They don't want to fire Diaz, so they know that Cristobal wants it. A lot of folks are talking about how, poorly Diaz has been treated by all of this. Of course, there's some extenuating circumstances here in the fact that Diaz, I think, was going to be the Temple head coach after Jeff Collins left for Georgia Tech and kind of spurned them. So not everybody feels like that Diaz necessarily deserves better treatment than he's currently getting, whether that's fair or not. But the other thing is, the reason why this is ongoing is because Diaz is going to make Miami fire him because he gets more money. He's not going to quit because he turns down some buyout money. Same thing that I think Mike Bobo probably had at the Auburn situation. You make him fire you because you get more money for doing so. So I realize that everybody right now is talking about how poorly Diaz is being treated by the Miami folks, but he's making a lot of money to be treated this way. He could end all of this by just quitting, but he ain't going to do that with all the buyout money that he would sacrifice for doing that. So that's the other story that's out there. And if Cristobal, who is a good recruiter, comes back to Florida, the state of Florida, I mean, that could be a factor for, new Florida coach Billy Napier. And obviously, Georgia and Miami have crossed paths in recruiting there before, too. So I guess do with that what you will. We'll make that your SEC through. And I want to give a quick shout out here to a group that I told you about there on Saturday. This is a really interesting thing. And to be honest with you, I try to keep up with everything that's going on in the world beyond just the world of football. And sometimes it's a little easier for me to do that than others. Obviously, one of the things you've heard a lot lately is the idea of cryptocurrency and what exactly that is. And I think for some of us, especially, some of us who are a little bit more of an old school bent, sometimes there can be a real mystery around the whole idea of crypto. So I think one of the cool things I can do for you right now is connect you with a company that can help you understand the world of crypto a little better, but also kind of connect with some folks that like the Dogs a lot, big UGA fans and folks that kind of already have a little bit of a connection to the the group that we're a part of here around DawgNation. Anyway, it's my friends at Space Dogs. Now, here's what Space Dogs is. They're going to take some of the mystery out of crypto for you. They're going to explain to you how you can safely spend your money, your crypto, and buy all the things you like to buy this time of year. A lot of folks doing a lot of spending online, things like that. And obviously the process of crypto can sometimes make that easier, or really all the ways in which you transact business. What Space Dogs can do for you is certainly a way to do that better, especially with a couple of the products they specifically have available. Their Dogs wallet, which is a crypto wallet, and their Space Card. This is going to help take some of that crypto mystery away for you and help you understand exactly why maybe this is a space you ought to be involved in. Maybe this is a way of kind of moving into the future that maybe it's time to consider with all that. So if you haven't done this yet, check out my friends at Space Dogs. Learn more about the crypto world. Learn more about how their products like the Dogs wallet, the Space Card, can help you there with that. They also have a really cool coin there too. Learn more about this. Go to dogs.io. That's the website. It's dogs.io. You can learn more about the crypto process. You can learn more about how all the ways in which Space Dogs can work for you can make the things you're buying a safer, more secure process. That's what Space Dogs can do for you today. So check out dogs.io on that. One more time on the website. It's dogs.io. Really cool new company, Space Dogs. So I'm going to read the room here just for a moment, and I'm going to assume that people aren't really quite in the mood for a golden shoe here today. So we're going to obviously get back to that and have a great time. I mean, people will be happier again. It always seems like in the heat of the moment after a loss, and this happens every time Georgia loses, in the heat of a moment after a loss, people are just devastated. And I get that. I'm right there with you. Trust me. On Saturday night, if I could have crawled under the seats at Mercedes-Benz Stadium and stayed there for 3 or 4 days, I guess I probably would have. But eventually you feel better again, and eventually we'll have some fun again. We'll go back to mocking the Gators and, everybody else. Maybe one of these days we'll even get a chance to mock Alabama too. But for now, the attention's got to be on the rest of the month. Getting ready for Michigan, College Football Playoff, Orange Bowl. It is going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. And then thinking about that showdown with Florida next October in Jacksonville. We're still doing Gator Hater Countdown because Georgia's going to get a win in Jacksonville again next year, 327 days from right now. Appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And we'll see you tomorrow and on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for all of that. And we are glad to have you with us on the show today. So we'll dive right into it. Y'all check out rsandrews.com and trust them. They told you need a new one. Get a second opinion from R.S. Andrews. You got some company that told you that. Trust R.S. Andrews to maybe explain to you how you can get some new life breathed into that unit and get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. rsandrews.com for more on that. All right, we'll do a good number of comments. We'll let you take it wherever you want to go, and we'll just kind of spit it all out and see how it finishes there. All right, let me do DawgNation.com first. J. Bob says, we've licked our wounds. Now it's time to beat Michigan. Totally agree with J. Bob on that. That's going to be fun. T-Dog says, play I think he means JT. Play JT and count on the offensive line to protect him. He gets the ball out quicker than Stetson Bennett, so mobility should be less of a concern. Stetson Bennett scrambles, which helps out, but also holds the ball long and takes sacks as well. So here is where I am going to agree and disagree with kind of the common opinion that's out there. The thing that I agree with is Georgia should absolutely consider making a quarterback change. And I think you have to consider that now so that you can prepare whichever guy you're going to move on with. That's the one thing that has been said from time to time that's just not true. This notion that you're going to split reps evenly and, unless you plan on playing the two quarterbacks evenly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to split number one practice reps evenly. You have to sort of decide who you're going to build the game plan around and and move forward with that. And I do believe that it would seem weird not to absolutely consider playing JT Daniels if he's healthy enough to be in there and do that. But like the one thing that I'm not going to do, and this is going to be a source of frustration for some of you, I am not going to assume I know more about this than Kirby Smart does. I think that Smart would serve himself better if he'd explain this better. I think it comes across as a little bit arrogant that he doesn't think he has to. But he is just privy to more information on this than I am. That just because it's weird doesn't mean that it's wrong that Bennett's been playing. And there is a chance that Bennett has just turned out to be the better guy for Georgia for whatever reason. I mean, there is a chance that Daniels isn't what some of us thought that he could be, or maybe at the beginning of the season, some of us thought Daniels was. Maybe Daniels just isn't that right now for whatever reason, because it would seem foolish to assume that Smart is intentionally playing the inferior player. That would just seem foolish to assume that. And I know that's frustrating. I get that. And I think a better explanation would go a long way towards this. But I think people have a tendency to want to conflate what they do know with what they don't know. What you do know is how Bennett played on Saturday. What you don't know is how Daniels would have played. What you do know is Smart didn't play Daniels. What you don't know is the reason why he didn't. 0-4 says, this is our opportunity. You gave 13 two shots. That means Stetson Bennett. He means the 2 shots against Alabama. Give JT Daniels the offense a shot. Mike Q says, yeah, the defensive game plan wasn't great. When it was failing, we didn't adjust well until it was too late. This loss, in my mind, falls on Lanning and Kirby. Yeah, I mean, clearly there wasn't enough being done defensively to mitigate the areas in which we already knew Georgia was going to be a little bit vulnerable. Everybody knew that if Alabama did what has done against a lot of teams, which is, line up those receivers and then pick on some of those mismatches, receiver against safety, receiver against nickelback, things like that, that's the kind of thing that Alabama had done well. It's really the way in which they came back against Auburn, right, is kind of finding that mismatch. Now, the one thing that Kirby said on Saturday night was, in man situations, he said Auburn actually played better against Alabama than we did. Smart himself said that on Saturday, and by we, it's just Smart talking about his own team. But if you're Georgia, those kinds of things aren't going to change. It's like in basketball. If you're playing a team that has a 7-foot center, like, you can't make him shorter. If you're playing these elite Alabama athletes, barring injury, you can't make them less athletic. You just got to find a way to utilize your own athletes and obscure whatever the other side's going to kind of do well there. RX Dog says, can someone in the media ask Kirby why we didn't play man with one deep safety like Auburn did up until the end of the fourth quarter? Did they not see how they shut them down and got plenty of pressure with that? Too much space for them to catch everything underneath. So, as I said before, you should go back and listen to the Kirby Smart press conference from Saturday, and this may be an unsatisfying answer, but Smart said it flat out that he thought Auburn played better in a man situation than Georgia did. That when Georgia tried to go man on Saturday, if you listen to Smart, said they just didn't cover it. And that's kind of what Smart said. Randy Hall said, what happened to Brini? I believe that was a coach's decision. I believe that was just a coach's decision to start William Poole there in that spot and not play Brini. Ryan Walker says Kirby's Dan Quinn 2.0. Let me finish this. Of course, Quinn, the former Falcons head coach. His stubbornness and ego will be the downfall of his program. He needs to stop falling in love with underdog stories and let guys that are true quarterbacks make the difference. Here is the problem I have with that statement. And you may be right. But here's the problem I have with that statement. I think the one mistake that a lot of the comments that I'm hearing over the course of the last few days are making is I think some of you are making the assumption that Smart is intentionally keeping, as you say here, a true quarterback, difference-making quarterback on the bench. I think some of you are making that assumption when you can't know that to be true. You can't know how well JT Daniels would have played in this game against Alabama on Saturday, or how he would play over the course of the full season. If you want to go back to the beginning of the year when it was assumed that Daniels was going to be Georgia's starting quarterback, the overwhelming majority of the media still wasn't picking Georgia to win the national championship. And you can say, I don't care what media thinks. But these are big name, well-known people. There weren't, I guess David Pollack did by the time it was all said and done, but there weren't a lot of big voices who were making that prediction for Georgia winning the national championship. There was still a little bit of a wait-and-see approach about JT Daniels at the beginning of the season. Yes, he had played well in 4 games at the end of the year last year for Georgia, but the only ranked opponent he had faced was the Group of 5 team Cincinnati, and he played pretty well there in that game. Now, listen, I'm not going to drag JT Daniels through the mud any more than I'm going to drag Stetson Bennett through the mud. I'm not. But that's like the one mistake that I believe that fans are making. Here's the hardest thing to consider of all. I think people gravitate towards the Kirby's not playing his championship quarterback. He's playing the other guy, as the commenter said here, the underdog story. People seem to want to gravitate towards that when what actually might be true is maybe Georgia just doesn't have a championship quarterback. Maybe it has a starting quarterback they've gotten the most out of they can and a 5-star quarterback who has maybe not quite reached his full potential because he spent a lot of time over the course of the last 3 years being hurt. That maybe that's the truth. That doesn't sound very good to hear that, but maybe that is the truth. I'm not saying that Daniels is hurt now because it doesn't seem like he is. But maybe he was hurt for a long time here this year, and that made it hard to trust him to be the starting quarterback. I don't know that's true, but I do think it's important to consider all possibilities. And unfortunately, it's probably a little bit more logical to assume that maybe Georgia just doesn't have a quarterback on its roster anywhere near as good as Alabama's quarterback. That's more logical, I would say, than the notion that it has a great quarterback that it's just choosing not to use. Rick Martin says Auburn-Alabama is a rivalry game. You can throw the books away in that game. I guess so. I mean, I'm right there with a lot of Georgia fans who talk about all the other opponents that Alabama's faced and played better, including A&M, who I believe the only team with a winning record that A&M beat all season long was Alabama. It is a little bit weird the way in which teams that are worse than Georgia, including Auburn now for a number of years, have played better against Alabama. That's a little bit weird. Khalid Winston says the issue of Justin Fields. So let's talk about that for a moment, because obviously that's a huge backstory that impacts the way that people think about this story right now. That in retrospect, and there were plenty of people who were also saying this at the time, and to be fair, but certainly in retrospect, Justin Fields has proven himself to be the better quarterback between he and Jake Fromm. Fields had the better college career. Fields is a starter in the NFL, where Jake Fromm has, kind of bounced around here a little bit as an emergency quarterback or a backup, things like that. Then in the case of Fields and Fromm, the wrong quarterback was chosen if you're basing this on which of the two quarterbacks was better. That's just objectively true based on everything that they did after that 2018 season. But here's the one thing that you have to look at in terms of the Field situation. This is not me being a Kirby apologist, because there are still some people who are even hesitant to say that Kirby made the wrong choice there, when I just think it's obvious that he did. So I'm at least willing to say that. But the Fields-Fromm situation is still a little bit more complicated than sometimes people want to allow it to be. Trent Dilfer, who was a little bit of a mentor to Fields because at the time Dilfer was the head coach of the Elite 11 quarterback camp, told Justin Fields not to go to Georgia. He told him exactly what would happen when he got to Georgia, and Fields still went to UGA anyway. So in the story of what happened at Georgia in 2018, the quarterback situation there, you have to acknowledge that Fields went to UGA against the advice of counsel, so to speak. He was told, if you go to Georgia, they are not going to put you in ahead of a guy that just led them to the national championship game, and Fields went anyway. We also know that Fields got disgruntled at Georgia pretty quick. By the South Carolina game, at least, Fields was already bothered by what he was able to do, playing in garbage time, only handing the football off, not getting a chance to throw. Now, it may be true that Fields' reason for being disgruntled there was justified. Fields could look at himself in comparison to Jake Fromm and know that he was the better of the two guys, not getting a chance to show that. He may have had a good reason to be angry, But once you have an angry quarterback, it's hard to make that guy the leader of your team. And ultimately, that may be one of the things that prevented Fields from getting his opportunity after LSU, going into the Florida game, when I think most people will tell you that Georgia was considering making a quarterback change there at that time. They didn't. Fromm played very well against Florida. Even the most ardent supporter of Justin Fields would have to acknowledge that Fromm played a very good game against Florida there in 2018. And then the rest of the story was kind of written. And I would say that Fromm played well enough against Alabama, certainly to win that game in 2018, that the Georgia offense that day was probably not the reason that Georgia lost that game. So it's fair to bring up the Fields discussion. It's, I think, just objectively true to say that Fields is better than Fromm. But as I tried to lay out as fairly as I possibly could, there are some complicating factors with the Fields thing there in 2018. So maybe that lands with you well, and maybe it doesn't. Let's see what else. James Marable says, I'm a fan of Kirby Smart, but let's be truthful. Right now, he's a quarterback killer. So let me give you another way to look at this. And look, I don't work for Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart doesn't sign my checks. Y'all essentially sign my checks. If you told me today, who do I want to worry about making mad? Make Kirby Smart mad or make y'all mad? I'd rather make Kirby Smart mad than make y'all mad, because if I don't have an audience, I don't have a show. Now, I can't still come on here and just tell you everything you want to hear, but the people who sign my checks are all of you. I don't have advertisers. I don't have my audience. So I exist to serve you. I don't exist to serve Kirby. But let me give you just a little bit different way of thinking about that, even though there's a chance that he is a quarterback killer. There's a chance that this is, to a lot of people, going to feel like, the second time that he's, not played the 5-star or whatever else. Almost no one has a quarterback as good as Alabama does. But in the absence of that, would you want to have elite players at every other position? Like right now, Georgia doesn't have a Jamison Williams. Georgia doesn't have a Bryce Young. So no one else does either. But what is still good to have is elite everywhere else, and Georgia truly is. That with Kirby Smart, he's been really good at building the program to where Georgia is right now. And I do give this team, the way that it's built right now, a chance to beat Alabama in a national championship rematch. And you may say, BA, you watched this game this past Saturday. It reminded you once again of just how much offense matters. Defense doesn't matter. I understand that. But we can't be totally prisoners to recency bias here, because the same way in which the storyline of Alabama over Georgia feels pretty familiar, I mean, Michigan is in the college football playoff with the exact opposite script against Ohio State. Ohio State's just as explosive offensively as Alabama is, but Michigan, playing a lot of the same way that Georgia did, used that style of play to bully Ohio State, win that game, and they're in the Orange Bowl because of it. Had they lost that game, would not be there, and Ohio State would be there. Another potential point in favor of its offense, quarterback, wide receiver, 7-on-7 football. That's the only thing that matters. Cincinnati is also kind of in the playoff. The story of the way they've been built here over the last couple of years. Tough-minded coach in Luke Fickell kind of brought that back to bear. That's a part of the story about how they've gotten to the college football playoff. That even though Saturday was another data point in favor of offense over defense, the entirety of this season has actually been a little bit of an argument for defense kind of being back a part of this discussion once again. And in NFL, rushing-based offenses are having a decent amount of success here right now. So only a couple of teams in the country have any access to the very best quarterbacks. Oklahoma has, because they had Lincoln Riley, and because they'd also had, Baker and Murray and all those guys, that they now have access to a level of quarterback that most teams can't get. Ohio State kind of has access to that too for a number of reasons. Alabama, because of the success they've enjoyed, have access to that level of quarterback. For the most part, the rest of the country gets to pick their quarterbacks after the three teams that I just mentioned pick theirs. That's just kind of the way that it goes. So until you prove yourself in that group, would you want to be elite everywhere else? Of course you would. And can you use what you do well? Can you use the kinds of recruits that you have access to? Because most of the country can't get the running backs Georgia can get, can't get the defensive players Georgia can get, can't get the offensive linemen that Georgia can get, can't get the tight ends that Georgia can get. Most of the rest of the country also looks with envy at all of the other depth that Georgia enjoys. So to me, this comes down to using the recruits that you can get, leveraging your brand for what it's worth to create the kind of game plan that does give you a chance to win a game against a team like Alabama. And if it's 45-42, then yes, Georgia's probably going to lose that. But could it win 30-23? Could it win 35-28? I believe that it could. Didn't on Saturday, and the way in which it unfolded on Saturday made you certainly feel like maybe it's never going to happen. And obviously Georgia's got a little bit of a losing streak against Alabama right now. But it's not the kind of defeat, as humiliating as it was, it's not the kind of defeat that causes me to want to wave the white flag. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. On YouTube, B.A.'s Cardigan says the quarterback position is the most important one on the field. That's why they're not allowed to hit him on practice. We need an elite quarterback. Totally agree. It'd be great to have the best quarterback in the country. Right now, Georgia can't get that guy. It just can't. Now, what you can do is take the five-star guys that you can get and turn them into an elite quarterback. But Alabama gets first pick on quarterback. Bryce Young was not going to come to Georgia. Is he going to come to Alabama? Yeah, right now he will. Now, maybe in 2023, Arch Manning comes to Georgia, but who knows if Arch Manning's going to be as good as what Bryce Young is right now. That I realize you need an elite quarterback, and I realize it'd be great to have the truly elite wide receiver. Right now, those players aren't going to Georgia, and right now those players aren't going anywhere other than small number of teams. Like there's a small number of teams that hoard all the best wide receivers, hoard them all, or at least the overwhelming majority of them. So in the absence of being able to get those easy button recruits, then what do? Well, you build what you can build and try to beat them the way that you are capable of doing that. Because, as I said, most of the recruits that Georgia can get, the rest of the country couldn't get either. So do what you can with what you have to get what you want. Dimitri Sullivan says, I'll say it again, until we get a quarterback who can hit guys in stride, we'll continue to have passing limitations. That's the difference in elite passing teams. I totally agree with that. That Georgia on its best day is not going to be the best passing team in the country. It's not. It's just not. So does that mean you have no chance of winning? If you have the inferior quarterback in a college football playoff game, I would say your chances of winning are less than what they would be if it was the other way around. But it's not that you have no chance of winning. You just have to use what you have. More YouTube comments. Aaron Dixon says, change the flipping offense and Kirby will attract them. But here's the thing, though, Aaron. The Georgia offense is changing. I don't know that it's possible to change any faster than it's changing right now. I really don't. Go back and look. I mean, I'll give you the numbers here really quick. Here are the numbers really quick. Hold on one second. Let me just do SEC rank. So let's just do points per game. That's a very simple thing, right? Let's just do points per game. So this year, Georgia was second in the SEC at 39.4 points per game. Well below Alabama at 42.5. But 39.4 to go along with a year ago when they were in a pandemic year at 32.3. Now that's a little bit of an asterisk because they only played SEC competition last year. So 32.3 when you're only playing SEC teams is actually not so bad. But even still, Georgia's almost a touchdown per game better in 2021 than 2020. In 2019, Georgia was 30.8 points per game. So over the course of 2 seasons, the 2 years that Todd Monken's been here, Georgia went from averaging 30.8 points per game to 39.4 points per game. That is an offensive transformation. I don't know that it's possible to transform more than that in a quicker time than that. And that's not enjoyable to hear, but it is true that you're not going to wave the magic wand and have all that appear. And you may say, well, you did that with Joe Brady in 2019. But LSU had also had a history of being better at the wide receiver position than Georgia has had a history of being. Remember, predate Kirby Smart here. Georgia went 10 years without signing a 5-star receiver from 2009 to 2019. So a lot of the recruiting limitations on offense that Georgia had, a lot of this predated Kirby Smart. I'm not looking to drag Mark Richt through the mud because he did a lot of good things for the program. But there was an erosion with the kind of skill players that Georgia was recruiting on the offensive end before Kirby Smart even got here. Remember, guys like Brian Schottenheimer and other offensive coordinators kind of making bad choices about which quarterbacks got prioritized. Remember that? Drought of truly elite wide receiver recruits. That's what Kirby Smart kind of inherited. Georgia, when Kirby Smart kind of got here, was able to lean on its RBU heritage, both long-term history and the fact they had guys like Todd Gurley and stuff like that. They were able to kind of lean on that heritage a little bit, and that's kind of what Smart kind of inherited. So the transformation for Georgia becoming a better offense has been happening. Even with Stetson Bennett here this year, when a lot of you aren't happy with Bennett as your quarterback, the transformation has been occurring. It may not be happening as fast as some of you want it to be, and it may not ever be as good as what Alabama is right now. That's at least a possibility. But you can't say Georgia's not gotten better offensively. They're like 10 points a game better over the course of 2 years. Let's get some more. Crow King 123 says we're chokers. I have no problem saying to Georgia, you got to play better in big games. I have no problem with that. And I don't even really know if it really is, you choked, or, the opponent got to you, that uniform, scares you. I mean, these are tough dudes. I would assume that's not the case. But one way or another, the results speak for themselves. That in the very biggest game against the very biggest possible opponent, Georgia has played seemingly worse than it plays on a per-game basis other than that. I don't have any problem saying you have an extra burden of proof. I have no problem telling Georgia that. You've got an extra burden of proof in a game like this because of what's happened previously. I got no problem with that. Christopher Black says Paul Moon speaks the truth. Let me see what Paul says. He says, stop gaslighting me. Is it me gaslighting you? Paul Moon says, I'm so confused right now. What exactly has JT done to turn the narrative that he's not a top-tier quarterback? We have more evidence that Kirby will mismanage quarterbacks than that JT isn't very, very good. So all I can do is lay this out here for you. Did JT Daniels in 4 games prove that he was a great quarterback and an obvious game changer at the quarterback position? I don't think the 4 games he played last year were enough to prove that. And in fact, you can go back and see what was being said in August. I mean, don't even take my word for this. Look at the survey of other people. I mean, Daniels was no higher than like third-team preseason SEC quarterback in most of the, whether it be the official predictions or the other stuff that came out there. I mean, Daniels was no one's pick to be first-team All-SEC quarterback. This is not me banging on JT. This is me trying to answer your question. This notion that Daniels had made it clear how good he was after 4 games a year ago, that's simply not the case. And that when Daniels and Bennett have played this year, I mean, you can do this yourself. Bennett's numbers are better than JT's. So I told you a lot during the season. My assumption is that JT's probably better than Stetson. But if Kirby Smart is this intent to not play JT, my assumption is there must be a reason why. And I'm just somewhat content to assume that someone who knows more about this than I do has reasoning that supersedes whatever I thought I saw with my own eyes. Daniels played well when he played for Georgia a year ago. But even with seeing how Daniels played in the 4 games that he played for Georgia last season, most of the most well-known voices in the sport still thought Bryce Young was going to be the better of the 2 quarterbacks. That's just what the preseason chatter was. In fact, I remember a lot of times in the summer saying that it was imperative that JT, who had experience, utilize that experience to be better than what Bryce Young, as an inexperienced quarterback, was going to be for Alabama this season. I remember saying that at the time. So, yeah, I don't think I'm gaslighting you on this, Paul. I think that that you probably are assuming that Daniels proved more last season in 4 games than maybe he necessarily did. Frank Patterson says, y'all remember when in the early year press conference when Kirby said, yeah, I mean, well, when Smart first announced Daniels as the starter, it was really more of a radio interview. We played that clip many times before. So this notion that Daniels never had a fair shot with Kirby, that it was always going to be Stetson Bennett because Kirby loves the underdog story. The fact of the matter is, Georgia's kicked Stetson Bennett to the curb like 3 times, right? They were happy to let him leave after 2017, brought him back, but gave him no chance to win the job in 2020, kicked him to the curb again after this season, or I should say before this season, after he had been the starter a few times a year ago. So this notion that somehow Kirby Smart's got this like love affair connection to Stetson Bennett, boy, I don't think that Bennett probably feels that way. He only got a scholarship offer at the last minute from UGA, was given no consideration to be the starting quarterback before the 2020 season began, and no consideration to be the starting quarterback before this season began, despite the fact that he had been the starter for the majority of the previous season. So, this notion that somehow Smart's in the tank for Stetson Bennett, like that just can't be the answer. Now, the actual answer may not be very satisfying, but that can't be it because there's too much evidence to the contrary. Thomas T-Bone says, do you think we'll ever play JT again? No, I don't. I don't. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But, I mean, part of me wonders what would happen if Stetson got hurt. Like, I mean, not that I would ever want that to happen, but just from a curiosity standpoint, part of me wonders what would happen. If Daniels thought he was going to play in the Tennessee game, which Brad Nessler said that he did, based on the conversation that Nessler had with Daniels' parents, if he thought he was going to play in the Tennessee game and he didn't, that to me speaks to a little bit maybe of a disconnect with what's actually going on, with what Daniels thinks is going on. And so if he didn't play there when he thought he was going to, and, apparently wasn't even in consideration to help bring Georgia from behind. Because that's what a lot of people were always saying. Oh, this is going to be Kirby's version of Hurts in 2018 or Tagovailoa in 2017. But even in the sort of darkest moments of the game on Saturday, Smart in his own words said, no, we never considered playing JT Daniels. I guess I sort of assume that no, he's probably not going to play again. Now, maybe the month of December provides this transformation on that, and maybe he is more deeply considered, and we never really find out what changed. But no, if I had to bet, I sort of assume that he's not going to play again. Let me go back over to Facebook. And we're going to go a few minutes. And y'all, hopefully, I've earned the right to turn the page on this tomorrow. I've taken a ton of comments today, did the majority of the show on quarterback. I can't do this each and every day. At a certain point, y'all got to decide. Are you willing to watch the games or not? If you want JT to play and he's not playing, are you on board or not? You just got to decide. I can't do this every single day. I am content to do it, and I got a radio show in a couple minutes, so I got to get off here pretty quick. But I can't do this. I've done this a ton today. I can't do this anymore unless something new comes out. So I'm giving you your chance today to get this all out. I made the show about this today, and after this, I got to turn the page. And then you just got to decide, can you be on board with it the way that it is or not? Keith Fold says, don't you see a problem that you said, I don't think JT will play again and I don't know why? Yeah, I do think that's a problem, Keith. But the problem that I think it ultimately is with the explanation. As I said before, I'm not going to assume the worst about Kirby Smart. I'm just not. This notion that his ego's gotten the best of him, or his stubbornness has got the best of him, or he's just not intelligent enough to make the correct quarterback decision. I'm not going to assume the worst about him. That I'm going to assume until evidence to the contrary, I'm going to assume the best of sort of all people in all situations. I'm going to assume that there must be a reason that Smart's doing what he's doing. But the problem, to use your word, the problem I see is Smart's unwillingness to explain it. That's the thing I wish Smart would do differently. I can't be sure that Smart's making the wrong quarterback decision, but it seems fairly obvious he's making the wrong choice to pretend that it's not a big issue that's currently affecting the way in which both these quarterbacks are talked about. I mean, and Smart says, these guys should tune all that kind of stuff out. Trust me, no one's tuning any of this stuff out. Everyone's aware of everything everybody's saying. It'd be foolish to pretend otherwise. And so what ends up happening is Bennett gets unfairly trashed because of the relative silence related to all of this. Daniels gets unfairly trashed because people start trying to invent a reason about why he's not playing. And all of this could be fixed and corrected if it was just a little bit more, open up. Let's see what else. Ken Feinberg says, are you willing to compare the third down conversion rate between JT and Stetson Bennett? Yeah, JT's is way better. That's not the only thing that matters to me. But the one thing that you shouldn't hear in all of this is, look, I am open to the possibility that Daniels should be playing. I think they should consider playing JT Daniels. But I'm also open to the possibility that if they are not, there must be a reason why. And I think that there are some people who are so I don't want to say in the tank for JT, but there are some people who are so kind of free JT right now, hashtag free JT, that they don't consider any of the achievements of Bennett this year, and they disregard anything that could potentially be an argument against JT Daniels. There are some people who have become so pro JT, they have kind of conjured up an unfair argument. They've created a straw man to argue against. I don't know that the evidence argues for JT as well as some people think that it does, but I also don't believe that the evidence suggests there shouldn't at least be a consideration to make a quarterback switch. Ryan Walker on the subject of William Poole. Yeah, listen, Georgia's got what it has in the secondary, and you just got to figure a way to use what you got. Antoine Middleton on the subject of reporters and the quarterback thing. Listen, I can promise you a lot of these reporters probably don't like me, so I'm not going to, break my back defending them. But I don't hear a problem with any of the questions. I mean, Kirby got him yesterday, got him Saturday. He's being asked directly about this quarterback thing. I don't really know what question that you would want Kirby asked that he hasn't been asked. And listen, I'm not one of these, journalist dudes. That's not my tribe necessarily. But when I'm not in those press conferences, I'm always doing a show, it seems like. But, overall, I don't really know what question is supposed to be asked to Kirby that hasn't been asked. He ain't answering them. And that's the thing. And they're going to keep being asked. No one's going to stop asking them. But the issue here in terms of the mystery, if there is one, isn't with the way the questions are being phrased. It's with the way that that Kirby Smart's choosing to answer them. And in fact, audio that I did not play for you in today's show, but did come up yesterday during the Orange Bowl press conference was one of the reporters asked Smart if he was going to, consider making a quarterback change or something like that. And Smart said, I've already addressed that topic. So Smart, in the audio that I played for you today, go back to the beginning of the show if you missed it, on the fact that they have a decision to make about positions at every position before every game, and the notion that they never considered making a quarterback change during the game. That is Smart telling you that's all he's going to say on the subject. That's it. So you can have an issue with the mystery, but you can't blame the media for this because the media is asking the questions, and they're going to continue doing that. Let's see what else. David Harvey says, put down the Classic City Lager. Let me tell you something. That's what I wish I had right now. That is what I wish I had right now, is more than a couple Classic City Lagers. Buddy Lee Zachary on using the tight ends. Tough day to say that, though, coming off Saturday. Darnell Washington caught a touchdown. Brock Bowers the only guy they threw to. Fitzpatrick had a good catch, too. Like, the one thing that Georgia did do well Saturday was throw the tight ends. They just didn't do anything else. Rosemary Taylor says, I agree with you, BA, that Kirby hasn't handled this well. He needs media coaching. Perception is reality, whether it should be that way or not. Here's the bet, though, that Kirby's making. The bet that Kirby's making is how he speaks to the media doesn't matter at all. That's the bet that he's making. The bet that he's making is you not knowing the real story is inconsequential. And maybe that'll turn out to be true, maybe it won't. If Georgia goes on to win the national championship, then Kirby Smart made the right bet. If that fails to happen this year and some of this kind of stuff snowballs in the future, then that does become the kind of thing that makes the collar a little tighter many years down the road. But for now, the bet that Kirby's making is that he can say and do whatever he wants with total impunity. That's the bet that he's making, and he may end up being right about that because everyone who's mad at him today will stop being mad at him the moment that Georgia wins the national championship. And frankly, the moment that Georgia beats Michigan, most of this stuff will be forgotten there as well, and Smart deep down kind of knows that. Tim Tatum says, kudos for allowing us to spew all this angst. We just have to get it out. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And, listen, I become a little bit of a punching bag for stuff like this. I'm kind of fine with that too. I love this team. Both Georgia football in general, this team in particular. I love this team. I love Kirby, quirks and all. And today kind of sucks. Not very much fun. You just get it over with and you move on. But trust me when I tell you, I am moving on. I want to give myself the credibility to ignore this stuff in the future. And if I ignore it today too, then I'm being inauthentic. But in the future, when this stuff shows up in the comment section, I scroll right past it. I want to feel justified in doing so. Kevin Cook says, I sense that Kirby Smart's losing the fan base with the way that he answers questions. Yeah, you can't be so quick to say that, though, Kevin. Like, Smart is not dumb. Smart is sharp, and he's very well aware of everything that everybody's saying right now. Like, he knows the EKG. The EKG is up right now because Georgia just lost. But eventually, folks will move on from this a little bit. I mean, think about this. There was no JT Daniels chatter before the game. Remember that? I mean, going into the game, there had been very little talk about JT whatsoever. Like, the topic had just kind of died down. So Smart knows that, of course, there's intensity after a loss. He understands that. But most of this will just kind of subside on its own. People will be less angry within a couple of days. It's just the way the SEC just kind of goes. Kathy Weaver Fuel, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Miriam Martin Corbin says this one hurts more because in the previous games we were winning. And this time and lost at the very end. This game we were only competitive for a quarter and got kicked all over the field for the rest of the game. Yeah, it certainly seems like the last couple of losses to Alabama have been kind of trending in the wrong direction. Miriam's not wrong on that. Scott Peterson says JT never lost a starting quarterback and hit Pickens in the deep fly. Yeah, he's done some good things. I think JT Daniels is a good quarterback. I don't think he played great against Clemson, but I think he's a good quarterback. Don't Tread on Me says Smart's not stupid, but he's very capable of making miscalculations. UGA people will not stop the chatter if we beat Michigan and lose again. Totally right. There is a chance that Smart could miscalculate this and that it becomes a bigger issue. But right now he is betting on the idea that all this will go away once Georgia wins. And I can't say that he's wrong about that. Grateful Dog says, I'm concerned about Michigan. They are peaking, are we? Yeah, Grateful. We're going to talk a lot about that. I think that Michigan's a very worthy opponent for Georgia in the college football playoff. I do. Good Time Dog says JT was hurt during the Clemson game. That's why he didn't throw long. But here's the thing you kind of got to get to it a little bit. And listen, as I said before, I'm not going to trash JT. I'm not going to trash Stetson Bennett. But at a certain point in time, the notion of, well, he wasn't himself because he was hurt. Look at the last 3 years. I mean, that's a lot of hurt. so that you have to at least consider that in the conversation. Paul Moon says people who are saying that we would have won by 20 points against Clemson with Stetson Bennett are nuts. Yeah, that's probably nuts. All right, I got to go, y'all. I got a radio show coming up. We got to go right now. It's 10 till noon. Thanks for being here. DawgNation Daily. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. You want more of this quarterback stuff. Chip Towers, one of the guys that was kind of pushing Kirby on this a little bit yesterday. Check them all out online, DawgNation.com. We're back here tomorrow, 9:45. And after that, we got to turn the page. Thanks for being here. We got to go. See you later.